Once again, who is a stakeholder? Remember the 3 in 3 for 3. Or 3 in 3 about 3, You are trying to identify, please note, you are identifying and you want to continuously keep identifying the people, the groups, the organizations or entities generally that could impact the project or that could be impacted by the project or that could perceive to be impacted by what? By a decision on the project, by an activity on the project, or by the outcome, the result, the product, the outcome, the final outcome of the project. So you see that the catch net is quite wide. Even one out of thousands of decisions on the project, whoever can be impacted by that decision is a stakeholder. Whoever can impact that decision is a stakeholder. Whoever perceives to be impacted, note, even perceiving to be impacted by a decision on the project, an activity on the project, or an outcome or the result of the project makes someone a stakeholder. So it's very important that you understand the context behind all of these things. When you are working on a project, even if someone is not impacted, the fact that they even have a fear that they could be impacted means that you need to carry the person along. So many government projects have failed as a result of this. So many private sector projects have not achieved the kind of success as a result of them not managing this, the full range of their possible stakeholders. Without mincing words, please understand the fact that stakeholder engagement is so critical to a project. It's regarded as one of the most important areas, because if you do it poorly, the project would fail. You really cannot, you need magic to succeed, because it is the stakeholders that you engage with properly that will give you the needs of the project. It is stakeholders that you engage with properly that will be able to assist you while you are working on the project. It is the need of the project that you are able, the requirements that you collect, that will form the scope. It is the scope that gets it's from the scope you get the budget. It's from the scope you get the resources you need. It is from the scope that you understand a lot of things. So if your stakeholder engagement is poor, you probably wouldn't be able to even get the right requirements for the project. You probably wouldn't be able to even, definitely once the requirement is poor, everything is most likely going to cascade from that. So identifying stakeholder also involves analyzing and documenting relevant information about their interests, relevant information about their level of involvement, relevant information about their influence, and then the potential impact on project success. It is critical for project success that you identify stakeholders early in the project. It is very critical. It is important to identify stakeholders early in the project, as nearly all planning activities are dependent on having, already related with the right stakeholders, or having the right stakeholders that you want to relate with. Stakeholder communications management, cost management, scope management, literally all the planning processes. For all the planning processes, you need to have already identified your stakeholders. But please note that stakeholder identification is an ongoing thing. Stakeholder identification is ongoing. But as much as we say it is ongoing, the earlier you identify them, the better. Because if you are identifying stakeholders later in the project, and those stakeholders are coming with requirements, if the requirements you collect at the beginning of the project are the easiest, if you are collecting requirements later in the project, it could be very difficult to integrate. Don't forget that requirements form part of the scope. If they are not independent things, they can't exist on their own. So if you are collecting a requirement, let's say when you are 60% done with the project, what if it's requiring you to go back to start from scratch? It could be very expensive to integrate requirements that you collect later in the project. So that is why you need to factor it in. So identification of missed stakeholders later in the project could cause changes to the project with potentially expensive consequences. So the later the changes are identified, the costlier and harder to integrate. Okay? It is important to constantly reassess the list of stakeholders. Don't forget that we are not just identifying, we are identifying and analyzing, classifying, categorizing. So all of these things you are doing, you want to consistently identify, and then you want to consistently reassess, recategorize as you move on the project. Because somebody that you regard as low interest today might become low interest tomorrow. The moment a stakeholder leaves the level of low interest to high interest, automatically that changes the way you are supposed to engage such a stakeholder. The moment a stakeholder leaves low level impacts to become high level impacts, that automatically should reflect in the way you engage with the stakeholder. So what this means is that you have to consistently reassess your list of stakeholders to identify potential new ones and to also identify the status or change in status or categorization for your stakeholders. This is to be done throughout the project. It is important to note that identification of stakeholders is done by the whole team and not by the project manager alone. Just like we mentioned during risk management, you need the whole team to be involved when you are identifying stakeholders. Just like you need the whole team to be involved when you are identifying your risk. And just like you have to consistently follow up on the status of risk and identification of risk in all your meetings, you also have to do such for your stakeholders, because a lot of these things change a lot. So you could also now consult some subject matter experts, or maybe rely on some previous documents and other OPAs for help. Part of what you need to rely on here is the content of your project charter. Your charter is that foundational document that you are receiving from the sponsor, or that is approved by the sponsor, from which you now want to proceed into planning the project. If you see, developing the project charter and identifying stakeholders are both processes in the initiating process group. So what this means for you is that you will be, and stakeholder is actually one of those things in the charter that the sponsor is supposed to help you with some base, identification. So you are supposed to take it up from there straight away and then expand on that just as you are moving into planning the project. It is important to pay attention to proper definition of stakeholders and not the general English definition.